there are some Bitcoiners who have enough Bitcoin. They understand the custodial risks. They've got, a stack sufficiently large to, cover collateral and 80% drawdown in Bitcoin's price, all of these sorts of things, that maybe they come out unscathed, and good for them if they do. But I don't think it's I think it's a product that far too many people are getting excited about, when there's probably 1% of the Bitcoin population who should really consider that as a viable option.
Interesting.
So that's my toxic maxi position, I guess.
I think it's a common sense position, honestly. The idea, if you think about it, first principles is like, let's say because this loan to value is usually like around 50%. So if you, for example, want to have $50,000, and like if it's lower than that, I would question why you're even doing it. But if you want $50,000, you have to give out $100,000 in Bitcoin. So you basically give out a full Bitcoin to get $50,000 in fiat back, and you are inclined to have risks. Like the Bitcoin can be, like, even if they are acting in best interest, maybe it gets stolen from the platform, maybe the platform goes under. Like, there's so many, even if you assume everyone is a good actor, even then there's so many risks associated with that. And I don't like the idea that retail is giving up Bitcoin to get fiat. Like that concept is just like really foreign to me, and like it does not make sense. And it's really interesting because I mentioned it on the podcast with Tony. Tony and the Bitcoin Way pushed me to accept Bitcoin payments. I did not accept Bitcoin payments actually before Tony, and Tony's like, "Oh, like, why are you not accepting Bitcoin payments?" And he's totally right. And now I think like 70 or 80% of my income is fully directly in Bitcoin. So that's definitely a thanks to Tony and the Bitcoin Way. And naturally, I came to the conclusion that I either have to sell Bitcoin to cover fiat bills, or I have to borrow against my Bitcoin, or I just have to get loans in other ways. And I ultimately decided to just sell my Bitcoin. Like, I still make more Bitcoin each month, but I sell some Bitcoin to cover the fiat bills and not borrow against them. If you have like 10% you can pay in Bitcoin, but you get 70% paid in Bitcoin. And it's a way better system for me to just have like the emotional calmness to deal with the volatility and everything like that. And I think it's more the Bitcoin way, the Bitcoin way. I love the name of the company also.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think the other complaint I maybe have is one that's more philosophical, and I'll be speaking about it in Prague in a couple of weeks. Is I believe Bitcoin is money, and I know there's a lot of philosophizing about what money is and how do we define it. But to me, is good money stores as a serve of value. You can use it as a medium of exchange, and it can account for value. It's a measuring stick for value. And the reason Bitcoin does all of those things well is because it's scarce, it's decentralized, all of these things that we talk about. My other concern, I guess, with these products is that it doesn't push forward the narrative and the adoption of Bitcoin as all of those use cases. If it's easy to slide into this place of complacency where you say, well, I'll just take out a loan, use Bitcoin as collateral, and I'll keep using fiat. I think what we need to be doing proactively is urging and encouraging and maybe even demanding our suppliers, vendors, local stores, your local farmer, whoever it is, to accept Bitcoin as payment. And if you know that you have what perceives to be a free lunch of this, loan that you take out fiat and keep paying with fiat, we continue to feed into the system, right? We perpetuate that. And I understand the practical reality that today, if I go to the my local grocery store, they're not going to accept Bitcoin, and I'm not probably going to talk a chain of, a grocery chain into accepting Bitcoin. But I think it's easy to just concede that to, these to the whims of companies and certainly governments. And the more that we can do to push forward Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, I think over time, that's how that application of our demand in the marketplace is what leads Bitcoin to winning in the way that I want it to win, because I think we need it to win in that way for the bright orange future. If it's exclusively a store of value and it's just governments buying it and it's just corporations holding it forever and ever, I mean, good. I think the value is going to go up. It's a scarce, digital asset. It has all these advantages, but we need it to be the medium of exchange use case before I think we, see the end of forever wars, for example, before we see a lot of the net benefits that we anticipate, a Bitcoin standard bringing into the world.
One question that I always have is like, are we maybe too are we trying to pull the future a little bit too fast forward into the present of like, yeah, like Bitcoin has to prove its store of value, and then we can also have the medium of exchange, and maybe we want the medium of exchange too quick, and we're not yet over the store of value phase, like the natural phases of like how money progresses.
It's a good question. I think that there are people who, if they understood, there are a lot of people, to your point, who understand that you're doing a podcast, you understand the store of value use case. You weren't accepting Bitcoin at one point in time, and it took Tony pushing you. But now you guys are adding to this like Bitcoin circular economy together, because we only use Bitcoin. We operate on a Bitcoin standard. And so I think there's something to be said that there are a lot of people who haven't acknowledged Bitcoin as a store of value yet. They're just asleep at the wheel. They're not paying attention, or they haven't been sold yet. Yeah, they're not going to accept Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, probably. I will say that the farmer who supplies me raw goat milk is going to accept Bitcoin from me. She doesn't know anything about Bitcoin. She kind of understands that there's something to this whole thing, and it's no skin off her back. And so there are probably easy asks in your life that you could ask people to accept as a medium of exchange. But I think it's a trap to assume that everyone has to, or everyone or some very large majority of people have to acknowledge the store of value before those of us who already understand the store of value can begin migrating to the medium of exchange use case. And I think there are a lot of, very entrepreneurial Bitcoiners out there who could begin accepting Bitcoin who currently aren't. And it's just sort of this thing that will build upon itself as we extend out and continue to educate the people who maybe aren't there yet, haven't accepted it as store of value. So I'm not really concerned about pulling that future back too soon. I think I would err on the side of caution that if we don't push for and promote that as Bitcoiners, especially within our own circle of people who generally, align with us on the role of Bitcoin in the world, I think that to me seems to be a bigger risk than pushing it off, further.
It's interesting.
I'm sorry, pulling it forward too soon, rather.
I had Jeff Booth on, I think like 2 months ago, something like that, and he said something that kind of stuck in my brain ever since, and I've mentioned it probably like 10 times already in the podcast. He said the sentence: "If Bitcoin fails as a medium of exchange, it will also fail as a store of value." I'm 100% undecided on that one, just because like we have a store of values like real estate and gold that are horrible medium of exchanges in the current world, but they still have a lot of value. But at the same time, I'm like, if gold also would be the best medium of exchange, the store of value would be so much bigger. So how do you look at the one requiring the other one in both directions?
Yeah, so I've heard Jeff Booth share that on several occasions. I'm a big fan of Jeff Booth, love him, and he's a guy who puts his money where his mouth is, and I think I've learned a lot from him. For the reason you described there, would tend to probably disagree, though I'm completely open to being wrong about this one. That I think Bitcoin can still serve as a store of value, even if it never achieves like broad medium of exchange adoption. And the reason, like you said, is you've got gold. I mean, gold's appreciating value. No one practically is using gold as a medium of exchange. I mean, for obvious reasons. It's heavy, it's expensive to insure and secure and ship. And we live in a global digital world, and a piece of metal isn't an effective medium of exchange in any, at scale, I guess, even if governments might settle in that. I think, and that's why you see a lot of paper gold out there and IOUs and those sorts of things. So I think that Bitcoin can't, and I think this is maybe the trap, is that Bitcoiners don't fully buy into Jeff Booth's thesis, because I think he could be incorrect about that. I think it could serve as a store of value. And so we hold on to the Bitcoin, which I think is a good thing to do. I think I save in Bitcoin. I think other people should save in Bitcoin. As though them becoming rich over some long period of time is the end all. To me, the end all is the bright orange future that we talk about. And it's very easy for you to get sucked into this narrative of Bitcoin as a store of value and a reserve asset and an investment, and to perceive it exclusively as a store of value. And the thing I always say is, if ultimately militaries aren't using Bitcoin to buy fighter jets, then I don't think the forever wars end. And that doesn't mean that your Bitcoin may not appreciate in value, and that some, you own one Bitcoin and 10 years from now, 20 years from now, your purchasing power isn't enormous. Yeah, I think that's probably very likely. But do we live in a materially better world? I'm less convinced of that.
It's also interesting when we look at the stages that are filled with people. For example, Michael Saylor is a big one, but now we have many more CEOs that use Bitcoin as a treasury asset, like MetaPlanet. I think Simon Gerovich, I maybe I butcher his name now, and then we have Semler Scientific with Eric Semler, many others examples, and many, like those are just the bigger ones, and there are many smaller companies. Is that kind of where maybe just like the narrative right now comes of Bitcoin as a treasury company, and then retail sees all those companies are lending, getting like $1 billion to buy Bitcoin at 0% interest rate. So I also want to do something similar. That this is kind of the reason why store of value and those borrow against the Bitcoin and lending products are kind of really pushed now.
Yeah, I think that. So first of all, I'm not here to disparage anyone. I think Michael Saylor is a financial genius. I think he's going to be the wealthiest man in the world here in the very near future, certainly in the next 5 or 10 years. And I think his conviction in Bitcoin, because of his conviction in Bitcoin, that will be well deserved. I think that as his Bitcoin journey has gone on, because I remember listening to him my first year or two in Bitcoin, learned a lot. I've been less impressed with the narrative that he's pushing. Now, where I empathize with his situation is he has a publicly traded company that is, he's got regulators and auditors and all sorts of people paying a lot of attention to what he's doing, whether he's in Bitcoin or not. My concern is that to frame Bitcoin, to pigeonhole it as exclusively digital capital, which is generally the narrative. I don't listen to him quite as frequently as I used to, but to frame Bitcoin in that way, really, I think it's a disservice to people who are trying to figure out what Bitcoin is sort of in totality. And that's where I think we see more and more people. Like I've seen a lot of people online. They're like, "Oh, I'm not going to Stake and Shake. I'm not going to spend my Bitcoin." And to me, it's like lower your time preference. Like the barrier to spend and replace, to go on River, go on wherever you buy your Bitcoin and immediately replace the Bitcoin that you just spent is, it's almost no barrier. It's a really bad excuse to say, well, I'm not going to spend it. Just replace it. It's a pretty straightforward thing. You can do it on your phone right there. And I do think, though, that as governments talk about SBRs, all of the attention that Saylor gets about the accumulation of Bitcoin he's doing, and he's talking about never selling, I think it creates this unhelpful narrative to those of us who are trying to educate people on Bitcoin for the purpose of money that changes the world. I don't think SBRs change the world. I don't think Saylor's acquisition of Bitcoin changes the world. I think it's how people ultimately end up using it that changes the world. And so you sort of have to step back and just say, well, what's my goal with Bitcoin? If your goal with Bitcoin is just to get wealthy, like, okay, yeah, maybe, have your own strategic reserve and like, that's it. If your goal is, I want a brighter future for my kids, I want, the elimination of forever wars, I want incentives to realign. So all of the nonsense that we see every day in the news, it begins to, disappear. Then I think we need to reframe and reorient ourselves to Bitcoin as peer-to-peer electronic cash. And the fact that it's programmable, engineered money means that new solutions are going to come about to make that even easier. There's going to be more, self-custodial options out there. It's going to be, lower friction over time for people to enter and use Bitcoin the way I believe it was not only designed to be used, but ought to be used for promotion of a much better, more prosperous world.
How important do you think for Bitcoin overall it is what kind of narrative there currently is in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin community? What is kind of like the push narrative?
How important do I think it is that we promote Bitcoin in like with the proper narrative, or I mean,
yeah. The kind of where I want to go is because there are many different narratives in the Bitcoin community depending on what time you live in. So if we go back in the time machine to 2015, where the Bitcoin community was completely different, there was a lot of a different narrative in the community. When you go back in, I don't know, 2012, I was not in the Bitcoin community in both of those times, but I can imagine it's probably a lot different to the narrative that is now into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I'm just wondering if that narrative might, is just adapting to what is currently the level we're playing at. And right now we are coming into companies and to even nations adopting it. So I'm like, how important is it to keep that Bitcoin ethos, that cypherpunk ethos, that peer-to-peer cash ethos in the community?
Mm-hmm.
And is there a chance, if that ethos and that narrative is kind of lost, that maybe also the core properties slowly get lost because everyone is kind of IOUing his on Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, I think that's a real risk. I think Bitcoin, the protocol is probably as cypherpunk as it's ever been. I think Bitcoiners are not. And I think it's very easy for people to get caught up in these more modern narratives of what Bitcoin is and to lose an appreciation for the importance of self-sovereignty. I think it's why we're yelling at people from the mountaintops to get your coins off of the exchanges. And we still have clients every day coming to us and say, "Oh, I've got my coins at Coinbase or whatever."
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.